Greetings once again. Still here in the warehouse over here in Germany doing the Rediscovering Peace series. This is video number 4. Kind of the hub. This video is going to be a little longer. It's if I had to do only one video of the presentation, if I had to choose any one of these 12 plus videos I'm doing in the series and release only one of them, this would be the one. The others are almost equally valuable, and they do work best in a series, but this is a really important one. Before I get into it, what I forgot to mention in the last video, 3B, was that the last couple of minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, I talked about the formula, a deeper meaning for the formula to get to heaven, love your neighbor as yourself. And for those who wanted to make notes on that or reference that in the workbook here, it was on page 8 of the workbook. You can download it from my website. Link to the website in the description box. Click on Writings, the Writings page, you'll see it, and you can either peruse online or download the PDF and have your own copy. Yeah. Page 8 was referenced at the end of the last video. And for those of you who want to see that it transcends Judeo-Christian ethics, right? I used a lot of Jesus-centric terms. I live in a Judeo-Christian society, so that's where my focus tends to be as far as the sacred writings of religions go. And yet I did research many of the other religions and found that this same principle that I talked about at the end of the last video is also found at the core of all the current major world religions. And I have citations for that truth on page 9. Okay? So, I wanted to say that. Now we're going to be covering pages 14 and 15 of the workbook, for those who have the workbook and want to have it open to make notes in while I do this. So, what we're doing now is something I call becoming human, in parentheses, humane, right? Because being human is a lot more than what we talked about in the beginning of video number 2. It's more than success or wealth or love or longevity or health, or even being smart and having knowledge. Being human, to really max out being human, you have to somehow get to the point where you choose to be humane, right? And that's what this graph, this diagram graph that I'm going to be drawing now talks about. This is very similar, and the foundation is the same actually, to the graph that the Peace Pilgrim herself used whenever she spoke with college students. She would draw something similar to this and reference it similarly in front of the class. And I thought it was quite insightful. I've adapted it to my personal experiences and my experiment with truth over the last several years living as Peace Pilgrim. And what it basically shows you in symbolic form is your life and what you can choose to do or not do with it. So let's get started. So first we start with conception, right? That's where we start. Conception. Here, right? By the way, without referencing it in writing, this axis is peace compared to suffering. The lower, the more suffering, the higher, the more deep-seated the peace. And of course, left to right, we're looking at time, right? So those are the two axes of the graph, okay? It could be one day, if you only live for one day. It could be 99 years if you live for 99 years. But this is a one human lifetime is what we're dealing with here, okay? So, I purposefully don't talk about, by the way, anything that happened potentially before this point. I don't get into past life regression theories. I don't get into karma from past lifetimes. I don't get into sacred contracts. Carolyn Miss talks about, we agreed to enter this particular body at this particular time to learn certain things. Maybe so. I'm humble enough to know there's a chance that's true. And essentially, for the life we have, it's irrelevant. We still have a set of challenges in front of us, and we still get to choose how powerfully or how weakly we make those choices and meet those challenges. Same thing goes true after our death, right? So, the symbol here is death, passing, transition back to the one, reincarnation. I kind of put the little white dot in there in case we do get in line somewhere to go do this again. Portal to heaven or hell, whatever. You know, after this point, it's interesting and can be mentally stimulating to discuss it, but it's essentially a waste of time. The only truth about the afterlife is we're all going to be surprised. So what we really need to do is focus on the time between these two moments, namely the life we actually have to live and what we're going to do with it, right? So, back to conception, shall we? Conception, we're conceived. And at this point, of course, we have no independent consciousness. For the first 19 weeks of our time in the womb, we do not have an independent brainwave pattern. We do not have an independent consciousness. We're just kind of hanging out, literally a part of our mothers. Okay, literally experiencing oneness, but not consciously. All right, so at some point here, though, around week 19 and 20 of the pregnancy, we become conscious. And our consciousness, as our brain continually develops past week 19 and 20, our consciousness becomes more and more acute. We are more and more aware of our separateness from our mother. And this goes along, we're still feeling good. We're still in a warm environment, a not too bright environment. Loud noises are dampened. Our mother is, for the most part, washing us with her hormones and her emotions, which are mostly feeling good that she's pregnant. Sometimes not, of course. I've witnessed and heard from pregnant mothers, but it tends to be, for the fetus in a standard pregnancy, it tends to be a insulated, warm, relatively nice time, right? And then, as our consciousness then develops, we see fetuses looking at their hands in the womb and wondering, oh, what's that, you know? And then it gets to the point where week 40 comes around, which is really not that long a period of time, and all of a sudden, a series of violent contractions take place, and we're thrown out of a small aperture into a bright, loud, cold room surrounded by masked people. Now, not always. There are other ways to give birth, which I highly recommend, that involve, like, water births to candlelight and Mozart. Highly recommended. But, you know, a lot of times it's still, you're being ejected from a place where you felt at one, and we are entering a realm where no matter how muted the sound, and no matter how warm the room, and no matter how kind the people who are receiving us into the world, we are, for that time, for the first time, separate, alone, separate from our mothers, individuals, and we know quite dramatically and quite painfully that we are no longer one. At least our brains are telling us we're no longer one. And then this is the bellwether for discomfort, right? That's the birth moment, okay? Now, birth is a beautiful thing. It's not a bad thing. And yet, because we've never experienced separateness before, or cold, or loudness, or brightness, or pain when the needle gets stuck in us, it's at quite a few hospitals still, this becomes our bellwether for badness. This is, no matter what kind of pain we experience later in our lives, it cannot feel as bad because of relativity as this moment, or as terrifying, or as lonely, or as separate, right? And so for the rest of our lives, regardless of how short or long they are, we are striving to get away from this pain and discomfort and back to this, right? That is the drive for us in our lives once we're born. Okay, so then life begins. Yeah, and I have that as this symbol here on the graph, because essentially it's pretty black and white. You know, it's good and bad, painful and pleasurable. Everything that is good for me is the pleasurable stuff, because most of the pleasurable stuff helps to keep me alive, more of that. And everything that's painful or uncomfortable, that probably is not helping me survive, and that's what I want to do, so away with that. And it leads to a very me-centric existence, still lived by the vast majority of the human population to this day. where it's just about survival. Zone 1, this is called Zone 1, I call this, which is survival yearning, yearning for survival, desiring just to stay alive as long as possible, essentially, okay? And this life looks like this. And yes, that looks like an EKG line. And the metaphor there is convenient. It wasn't intended to be that way purposefully, but it sure worked out well, because that's what it's about. Just keep me alive. So something amazing happens, right? And we feel awesome. And then we realize that that amazing thing is going to dissipate, just like we talked about in video number 2 previously. And then we feel exceptionally sad that it's gone. And then we balance something dramatic happens, either good or bad, and we bounce around and reverberate, and then we reach some sort of acceptance of it, and we adapt to it, and we wrap our lives around it in a way that can deal with it, and then we move along. Often involving routine. Routine is seen by the ego and the survival seeker as a good thing, because routine keeps us safe and it keeps us alive. We do what's worked before, we do what's worked before, and we just, we drone along through our lives, and then something invariably happens again to shake us up. And then we reevaluate and we drone along again. And we do this if we don't make any progress and we don't wish to grow any further as a human being. We do this until we die. Regardless of how long that takes, or how short a time we have on this planet. This is the dance we do. Yeah? And this is a human lifetime, okay? Without any kind of awakened process, without any kind of awakening. This is basically what happens, right? This is what the primitive brainstem would have you do. This is the life it would have you live. Get here, try as hard as you can to get back to here. You can only get this far on this selfish plane, which is what this is all about. Is to get back to here, you have to do some pretty radical things, which is what this whole video series is about. But you're trying your hardest to have as pleasurable a life as possible for as long as possible, and that's success, and that's a good life, and then you die, and that's all it is. Boom. Right? And that's the ego's view of humanity, of being human. Yeah. That's when you hear people say, "But I'm only human." Right? You're not only human. You're not. That's the whole point of this. But your ego wants you to think you are. And then you do whatever you do here, which we'll talk about in the next video. This is a very interesting journey, I think, that consciousness takes. Just last month, I believe, I read an article that science is now proving that even after your body dies, you do have the ability to maintain thoughts for a period of time before the brain. Yeah, consciousness does remain active, at least for a period of time after death, which makes tomorrow's video or the next video all the more important, right? But anyway, the funny thing about this is there is more to it. There is more to being human, which is what we talked about in the second video and the last few videos as well. There's this deeper knowing that there's more. There's more to being human than just living as long as possible and having as much pleasure as possible and comfort as possible. There's more to it. Because completely in harmony with the beautifully smooth bass frequency of the universe, which does not see separateness. The universe is a universe, and it hums along at a frequency of perfect harmony that is an actual frequency, a bass frequency that is embedded within all of its components, right? Every cell of its components has a bass frequency in harmony with, because every part is a part of the one. Of course they have the same bass frequency, right? And the human conscience, right, the mixture between whatever part of the brain it's located in, which is yet to be identified. Some say the neocortex, some say maybe the other part of the amygdala. Some say it's the heart brain, the energy field that the heart emanates that then is connected with the neocortex. Whatever it is, there is a base frequency that we call conscience or soul to a human being that knows there's more. That it is a fact that there's more to living and to being human. Yeah? And that it knows that this is not going to cut it, right? And so at some point, a leap is made for about 10, I'm guessing 10% of the human population, maybe 15 if we're fortunate. I'll just say 10. And congratulations, since you are watching this video, you have made this leap that I'm about to talk about, the leap to zone 2, which is seeking truth, right? So at some point here, be it in adolescence, early adulthood, for some people in later adulthood, something happened that was highly unpleasurable. Sometimes it happens when things are really good. Sometimes it just happens. But in most of my encounters that I've heard about people making this leap, it's happened during and immediately after a highly unpleasant event, where you sit back and you say, I'm fed up, there has to be more, I'm going to go looking for it. And so you make this leap up to here, right? So it's still got this black-white component. It's still about you, right? It's about you looking for more for you. There has to be more for life for you. There has to be enlightenment or salvation somehow for you, inner peace for you, to become a better person for you, and yet you're open to learning. You start humbly looking at different teachers, different teachings, right? Different spiritual practices, different psychological practices, right? And so instead of an EKG line, your life then becomes like this. It becomes smoother, right? And then here, and then it does it again. It goes here, and then it does it again. And at some point here, death. This is zone 2, seeking truth. So, you see it's smoother. It's not as jagged because you've transcended a large chunk of the selfishness. You've also transcended a large chunk of the suffering. Well done. You're still in it for yourself, and you're in it intellectually. So here you'll start a new practice, or find a new church, or find a new meditation group, or read a new self-help book, and you'll feel like you learned something, and oh, you're closer to peace. I'm closer to inner peace now. I'm getting closer, or I've got it, right? And then you'll quickly realize that you don't have it, that you may have made a little progress knowledge-wise, but you're still pretty much in the same boat you were in when you first made the leap, that you really haven't gotten anywhere. Yeah. And what you don't realize is this is so far away and has so little to do, has nothing to do with you, right? As long as you're focused on you and your growth and your learning and your enlightenment and your inner peace, you cannot ever experience enlightenment, growth, or inner peace, right? Because the two are oil and water. They're mutually exclusive. You have to live as one without self, purposefully and consciously, in order to do so. But you don't know this here. All you know is you're learning and you're getting better, right? And so you'll buy the next self-help book, and you'll digest it and feel awesome. And then you'll realize, damn, it just didn't cut it. And you'll kind of go for a while. Maybe you'll read a Deepak Chopra here, or you'll see something on Oprah, and you'll think, ooh, that's it. That's the bomb. I've got it now. Thanks, Oprah. And then you'll become like an Oprahite, or a Deepak Chopraite, or a Wayne Dyerite, or a Anthony Robbinsite, or whatever ite you are. And you'll realize after a time, you know, I still feel it. I still feel that I'm far away from this peace, this oneness. I'm far away, and I know it's out there. So you'll get a new book, or a new group, or a new practice, or a new religion, or a new, and you'll do this for the rest of your life until you die. And you have transcended quite a bit of selfish junk down here, so your journey back to the one will be, in this final few moments of consciousness, a lot less unpleasant, and yet unpleasant it probably will remain, I'm afraid. We'll talk about that again more tomorrow. And then what I have to share, and what this series of videos, this presentation in this series of videos is all about, is making one more leap. And it is the greatest of leaps, at least in terms of being in a human body. Now, there might be other ways of existing that don't involve being in the human body. Again, we have no idea what happens after here. It could be a lot of miraculous existences filled with lots of other challenges, but as long as you're in a human body, you can only max it out one way, and that's to pretend what do I mean pretend? To act consciously as if what is true, namely to act as an agent of the one as opposed to an agent of yourself. And the more powerfully you do that, namely the more purely you do so in those times when you least wish to do so or are most afraid to do so, the more purely it blossoms and the more perfectly you return in those moments to this long sought for experience of oneness, which you have known since your conception. Okay? So, what's keeping you here, I have on the chart too, is this fog I have here called the veil of duality. It's on the graph. And so, what happens is, here we have self-actualization, down here we have learning, meditation, yoga, curiosity, and here we'll have stuff like savings accounts and insurance plans, and here's just basic self-gratification, playing a lot of video games, going to the bar on Friday. Down here we have actual immoral deeds that intentionally harm others for personal pleasure. I could begin to talk about animal agriculture here, but I won't. But that's down here where you're, intentionally causing other beings pain for your personal pleasure. So you have this scale, and in every moment, each choice puts you at an independent spot in this realm, as long as you're doing it self-focused. This is not a gradual growth process, though the graph tends to make it look like that. In any moment, you can be anywhere and go anywhere in the next moment, based on the power and the purity of your intention and the courage of your choices. This is not I'm growing, I'll just 5 more years of therapy and I'll finally get there, just 3 more self-help books, if I just practice my Buddhist meditation. No. There's no long, slow development. You can be anywhere on this graph and say, I'm done with living purely for me. I'm going to do the most radical, crazy, loving thing I can do, and I don't care what happens to me as a result. And you do it, and what happens is the final leap, right? And it can be anywhere. Here, I put it here. It could be from down here. Mostly it happens from here. And you bust through, right? You bust through, and I make this a yin-yang symbol, not because I'm a Taoist, I'm most certainly not, but because it is at this point that you realize that in the times when you least wish to love, and you love anyway, you're most powerful. In those times when you have the least to give, but you give that little anyway, you're most powerful. In those times when you are most afraid, but give to the source of your fear anyway, or are kind to the source of your fear anyway, you are most powerful. Because what happens is, you transcend all the baggage. You let it all go. 90%, secular pain studies show that 90% of our perceived pain, which is actually suffering, perceived pain is suffering. There's actual pain, the needle going in, and then there's the suffering that comes from that pain, right? 90% of the suffering doesn't come from the needle getting stuck in the hand. It's our resistance to the needle getting stuck in the hand. It's our wishing the needle were out of the hand. It's being afraid the needle will one day go back into the hand. And when you choose to love anyway, 90% of your suffering immediately is dismantled and falls away. That in and of itself is a beautiful feeling. All of your fear-generated suffering, 90% of your sadness, anger, and fear, 90% of it immediately disappears because it cannot coexist. It is impossible to focus on caring for another and be sad, angry, or afraid. Think about that for a minute. It is impossible. It is impossible to be sad, angry, or afraid while you are actively and sincerely caring for another person. Try it. I've tried it. It is impossible. The human brain can only focus in one direction. Otherwise, we'd go nuts. There'd be too much information bombarding us, and we would just be almost, we would reach stasis. because it would just be too much. We have to focus only on one thing, and we can choose what we focus upon, you see. And when you choose to say, you know, no matter what happens to me, I'm here in this moment to serve, and you reach out powerfully to care, especially when you least wish to, especially for those least deserving of the same, least deserving, yeah. You let so much fear purposefully fall away, yeah, that you literally, in that time, become one, psychologically and perceptually, with the object of your giving, right? And you enter what Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven, right? What some Buddhists call nirvana, the Taoists call, you harmonize with the 10,000 things, right? So, this is zone 3, which is living virtue, right? Because, this is physical, this is more emotional, right? Fear-based, right? Your deeds are controlled by your emotions and your fear, selfishness. This is intellectual, very mental. How can I learn more, understand more, and thereby become more peace-filled, right? But then here it's like, screw all that. I've got so many moments left before I die, and I want as many of them as possible to be as powerful as possible and to bring as much peace as possible, and that's all I care about. I don't care what happens to me. And you smash through this every time you do it. Smash through. And you reach, the more difficult it is, the higher you go. And this chart, by the way, goes, actually, it needs to be about 100 feet taller. So right here at the fog, you need to extend this line and this line up about 100 feet. And this stuff's way up there. Because there's this massive bliss, right? If it's relatively easy to be selfless, like if I'm going to anonymously, a friend has lied about me behind my back, and I know about it, and I give him an anonymous gift. I put an anonymous gift on his desk. Okay? That's completely selfless. I get no reward for it. I don't tell anybody I did it, but it's relatively easy because I love the guy, right? Not capital L, but I feel warm feelings for him as a person. That'll bust me through, but it's relatively easy, so relatively unpowerful. Now, you take the same situation that somebody's lied about me behind my back, and it's someone I can't stand, someone who has harmed me immensely. Maybe the lie cost me my job, and I'm on the street as a consequence, right? And if I go then and to that enemy's face say, I forgive you, I'd like to give you this gift, and just walk away, right? That's incredibly difficult to do. We're programmed to do the opposite, and because it's so difficult, we smash through and we reach an exponentially more powerful experience of peace, and more importantly, all those witnessing that event are also that much more powerfully awakened to the same potential in their own lives, you see. This can be, and is, when practiced, a very powerful agent of social awakening and social change. So last 2 points, and I'll close this baby out, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. In the next video, we'll also use this diagram. We're going to talk about this in the next video, your last few moments. But the 2 important things really to remember here are this is not a merit badge. There seems to be the common misconception that once you do an enlightened deed, you are enlightened. Once you learn enough, you become enlightened. There is no enlightened, right? This is a moment-to-moment experience, right? Even though I have lived a large portion of my last 12 years kind of wavering from this side of very high zone 2 to mid-level zone 3, sometimes in the very beginning, very high-level zone 3, but I've been kind of wavering back in here. At any moment I can sink back down to here, right? It's always tempting. I'm always tempted, just like all of us, to be selfish, to take care of me and mine. Because I've spent so much time here, it feels that much worse when I go back here and I immediately depart. And I remember, whoa, this is disgusting. This is not a good life to live. We only have so many moments left, and I don't want to spend them down here doing these harmful things. And I move back, right? But it's not like because I've reached here, I'm humming along up here. It's not the way it works, okay? you get to keep re-choosing, which ties in with the second misconception you might want to discard, and that is this is a growth process. It's not like over time, the more you practice this, the better you get, right? It does become a little easier the more often you break through, but really only marginally, right? The reptile brain is incredibly powerful, and its drive to have you take care of yours and live as long as possible, as comfortably as possible, is incredibly powerful. So this will never be easy, thank goodness, because if it was easy, it wouldn't be powerful. So for the rest of my life, for example, I'm going to be presented every day with around, 2,000 to 3,000 opportunities to pause, quarter of a second, to let my neocortex choose my response to any particular moment, and then I get to choose, if I wish, to radically be kind where I'm least inclined, to radically give to the person or the situation to whom I least wish to give, or to whom is least deserving of the same, based on his or her actions towards me or others. And when I do that, right, I break through again, and I receive the feeling of oneness, which is beyond bliss for me, and of course those who witness it and feel it limbically around me are also inspired to, at the very least, their day is made more joyful. If not, maybe they're also inspired to at some point do likewise. So I think that's it. I think that's it. The final thing I'll say is it's very tempting to believe that you've already been here. Invariably, when I give these presentations in the past, I would almost invariably anyway have someone in the audience say, yeah, I've done that zone 3, it was all right. I've done it, it didn't work for me. I've done it, and it's just, I'd rather stay down here. If any of those thoughts cross your mind, all you're really admitting to yourself is you haven't even gotten close to here. Not even close. Right? I mean, you take the wildest joy and pleasure you have ever known in your life, and this is 1,000,000 times more. It is beyond description. And once you experience this bliss and remember, that's a re-capital M member, reactualize and remember why you're here, to serve and not be served, right? To give and not receive, to love and not be loved, right? When you remember that and feel how amazing that is, to transcend all this fear and yearning and just give and be a source of love and kindness in a world that so desperately needs it, you would never go to any presentation and say, yeah, that oneness, it's all right. No, it'll blow you away, and there's no denying it once you experience it. So if you have any doubts about how amazing this is, all it means is you haven't busted through yet. And we're going to talk later videos about practical ways that you can start experiencing that bust through. And all I can basically lead you into doing is dipping your toes in the water and just peeking over the edge, right? If you really want to do it, I can't help you. Each of you knows the unique enemies you have in your life that don't merit any kindness and actually merit self-defense and shunning and healthy boundaries and rejection. Everyone has people in their lives that are treating them less than appropriately and less than respectfully. And every one of us has fears and sadnesses, right, and angers. We all do. And they're unique to each of us. So the only person who knows where you can most powerfully break through when you're giving is you. Essentially, you make a list of the 3 people currently in your life who merit your love the least and just start going crazy on loving them, right? In the beginning, it's best to do it anonymously, because otherwise you might get a thank you or a reward, and then it sinks you back down here and you won't actually be doing it. But if it's self-sacrificial, if it costs you something, and you don't want to do it for someone who is or has recently harmed you, right? Is harming you or has recently harmed you, then and only then you'll really know what I'm talking about. And once you have the courage to do that, it kind of takes over itself. You enter a realm which I think some have called choiceless awareness, where you realize at that moment the truth of what we can be as humans, humanes, right? And at that point, even though you know you can go back to just learning, and you know you can go back to just hoarding or becoming, even though you know these are choices, they're not really choices anymore. Because you've experienced this, and next to this, nothing compares. So anyway, I think that pretty much covers it. I'm going to leave this graph up, and we'll use this graph in the next video. And, yeah, I think that covers it. There might be some questions related to this video. Feel free to contact me if there are. rediscoveringpeace@gmail.com. There's a direct link to that email in the footer of my website. Also linked again below in the comment box. Okay. Love you guys immensely. Hope you got a lot out of that. Have faith that it reawoke some truth in you that you've also known since your conception. And, yeah, I wish you a joyful journey towards Zone 3 if you so choose to go there. Okay? All right. Peace out.